Hello, Hillman Talk University. I'm Professor Bianca Holman, and you have reached Introduction to Agency Social Work. And so I'm going to be talking to you about different things in the Department of Social Services Agency, Department of Human Services, whatever it may be called in your area. Okay? And so this is week one. And so, like I said, we're going to talk about what is DSS, Department of Social Services, Department of Human Services, whatever it may be called. So, the Department of Social Services is the agency that handles different types of aid to the community, whether it be paying for daycare services. It used to be called AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children. Now it's called TANF, which is aid in the form of a monetary check per month. There's also food and nutrition. Food stamps is a food card now. So one of the things about Department of Social Services is it has several different areas that address several different things. And lots of times when people hear things like child placement, child protection, they think of one or two things, when in actuality it's a myriad of things. Okay, so I spent a long time at Department of Social Services, and probably about 15 of those years in child protection, child placement. So I'm going to talk about some of the departments of DSS. So we'll start with child placement. You have sometimes a placement worker, a child placement social worker, and all they do all day is find placements for children in foster care. They sometimes have a book or sometimes have a spreadsheet of different foster parents. And they know, okay, this foster parent only takes 0 to 3. This one takes sibling groups. This one takes teens, different things like that. And they also might work in training people how to be foster parents. There's a class that's called MAP GPS, MAPP/GPS, Model Approach to Partnership and Parenting. And what it is it teaches people how to be foster parents. And so that class is usually required before you can be a foster or adoptive parent. And there's different types of, adoptive foster parents, and we'll talk about that too. So that's one, a placement worker. You might also have a unit, and a unit usually consists of a supervisor and 4 to 5 workers. And so you might have a unit of adoption care workers who work with children who are in the process of being adopted or moving to adoption. You have treatment, and treatment is you are a treatment unit, and they're working with the family in the home so that they hopefully won't have to go into DSS custody. And let me tell you this too. As far as custody is concerned, DSS might make the decision to take custody, but a judge has to sign off on every child that comes into Department of Social Services custody. A judge has to agree to it and sign off on that. Okay? And so one of the things we'll talk about too is when you work in child placement, child protection, you might get called to court at any time and any day. And so you might say, okay, today is my day, I'm going to be just working in the office. And they might call you and they say, well, we need you to, the judges are asking for you to come over and give some information about this case or these kids or something like that. So, and then that'll go into our tips. Like one of the tips is if you work at Department of Social Services, and especially in child placement, child protection, always have a dress coat and some dress shoes. Okay? You might want to go ahead and just have a whole dress outfit, like the pants and everything, because jeans are not allowed in court. So if they call you on a Friday and that's a dress down day, or you have a dress down day, you can't, they won't really let you in court with jeans on. Sometimes they won't let you in court with sleeveless things on too. It just depends. Every court is different. So then you have a foster care unit. And depending on how big your DSS is, your city is, there can be I worked in a county where there was one foster care worker, there was one treatment worker, there was one adoption worker, and then I worked in county where there was units of them. Foster care is they're maintaining the kids in foster care. Usually, it's 1 year to permanence for children, and after 1 year of permanence, like some decisions have to be made. Are the children going to be able to go back home, or do the children are they now going to be able to be adopted? That is several meetings that is held over the course of the year to just decide what's going on, if anything, with mom, with dad, different things like that. Then you might have a unit, and all the unit does is intake, meaning that again, you might have a unit supervisor and 5 or 6 workers who all they do is on the phone all day taking calls, and there's a screening process to screen. They might get 100 calls. They might only screen in 20 based off of the facts of what is given. Okay. And that is in child placement, child protection, as far as the sections. Then, you get down to income maintenance, Medicaid workers. You have Medicaid workers. And let me say this, for usually child placement, child protection, in the past, the max of cases that you can have is 15, usually, for child placement, child protection. It might have changed over the years. But the thing about it is, one case can have 5 kids. And usually the mandate is you must lay eyes on those kids at least one time a month. You have to go and see them at one time a month, either in the school, in the home, a baseball game or something like that. My joke used to always be, I don't work 8 to 5. I begin when it starts and I end when it finishes. And sometimes it starts at 2 a.m. and sometimes it ends at 11 p.m. It just depends. You also have the teen unit, back to child protection, sorry about that. And the teen unit is where that unit, they have teens in their caseload. And so my experience has been that teens are placed out of town. And so because of that, I would have a lot of mileage on my car. Maybe I would rack up 10,000 miles on my car per year. Okay. And so that's something that if you're going to do agency social work, and if you're going to be in some of these units, some of these things that they didn't teach you in school was, you might, while you're buying lunch for yourself, you might have to be buying lunch for the 3 kids that you're transporting to. And DSS reimburses. Okay. They reimburse you the next month. And so you have to be, cognizant of that. And so, okay, let me get back to the units. Okay. So another unit might be investigations, where they investigate the calls that came in and all of this. And I know everything have time periods. For some investigations, you have, 3 days, and that's days, not business. You have 3 days to get out there and start the investigations. Some are you have to get out there within 24 hours. It just kind of depends on what's going on, what's reported to have been going on. Have I been scared going out to homes as an investigator? Absolutely. Have I been threatened? Absolutely. My name is Bianco. I've been called everything but BIANCO. They added some different letters in there sometimes. So, kids, cussed out by kids, cussed out by adults, threatened by kids, threatened by adults. You have to have some tough skin to work at DSS. Okay. And okay, let's go to the other units. So income maintenance, where they do Medicaid, where they have do food stamps, where they do TANF. Now, sometimes these workers have 300 and 400 cases. Remember I said child protection, child placement usually have 15, but these workers have 200 and 300 cases sometimes, and they're seeing people on a regular basis. Now, I know during COVID, we didn't see a lot of people, a lot of people weren't seen because a lot of things were virtual. But like things that have to be turned in, you have to turn in, birth certificates, IDs, all different types of things. Okay. And also, that's the income part. Then you have the Adult Protective Services, which is called APS. Okay. And so, Adult Protective Services is lots of things. It is guardianship, where maybe you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with some issues of competence and can't handle their own money, can't pay their bills. And so that is a court process too. DSS will go to court and have guardianship over that person and pay their bills, or maybe that person needs to be placed in a group home or a residential nursing home or something like that. You also have a unit that does in-home care. That's all they do, is in-home care. You also have a unit that all they do is they check on the ACSs, which is care homes, not nursing homes, care homes. They check out family care homes, adult care homes, rest homes. And so that unit is called, again, that's APS. And so that unit consists of people who go out, and they're called adult home specialists. They are social workers also. So at one time period, I was the sole adult home specialist in the county that investigated referrals from rest homes. So I might have got a referral saying that the staff is sleeping on the third shift. Well, that means I have to go out on the third shift, 2 or 3 a.m., and go to the facility to see if the staff are indeed sleeping on the third shift. Remember, I said with DSS and some of the jobs, it is not 8 to 5 or 7:30 to 4. It is when we begin and when we end. Okay? Also, in some Department of Social Services, you will find domestic violence and where they deal with domestic violence shelters in the area, in your area. Some Department of Social Services have child support in it, but lots of times child support is its own entity as well. Also, for both APS, Adult Protective Services, and CPS, you will have an after-hours worker. So you have a couple of workers who their time sheet starts at 5 p.m. and ends at 8 a.m. So even though the DSS building is closed, sometimes they're located at the police department, sheriff's office, detention center. And so if there's referrals that are called, or if a child is taken into custody at 11 p.m., that child needs to be placed, and so somebody has to do that. A social worker has to do that. Same thing for adult protective services. If there is something going on with an older adult or an adult that is dealing with some competence issues at 10 p.m., then that has to be addressed at 10 p.m. And so sometimes the way they work is 1 week on, 1 week off. It just depends. It's different, varying shifts, varying ways that it can be done. Also, like I was talking about, that they teach classes as far as foster parent classes. I've taught the foster parent class for years. I taught the foster parent class, especially when I first began. Again, I think that the Department of Social Services is a great place to go to and get some social work experience. It will definitely bring you into the know of the resources in your area. And even though a lot of the work that I did was in child protection, child placement, sometimes I still had to go to the daycare unit. And that's why I didn't mention too, the daycare unit, if they qualify, then daycare will be paid for a person's children, and the daycare will get vouchers from DSS to pay. So sometimes if there was a child in custody that I was the foster care worker, I would have to go to daycare and sometimes maybe switch to daycare or get a daycare voucher for a certain daycare. And so it is very interesting. And one of the things is, I always said that Adult Protective Services was like 35 miles per hour, whereas Child Protective Services, especially child placement investigations, was about 55 miles an hour on a good day. Okay, and so like I said, there's a different departments within Department of Social Services. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so depending on where you are is depending on sometimes the services that are offered. The Department of Social Services in a small rural county is not going to have the same amount of resources and people that one in a big county does. Like Mecklenburg County is a huge county. They have lots of resources, and they might have 4 units of social workers for adoptions, whereas Catawba County or Wilkes County might have something smaller. One of the things you get to know is you get to know your state as well. As an adoption worker, I worked in the teen unit, and so sometimes my teens went to jail. So I had to go and get the teens out of jail. And so it got to be that in certain counties, people got to know my name. They knew that I was foster care. They knew I was in the teen unit, and they knew I was coming to get my kid. And those were my kids. As far as, they're in foster homes, they're in group homes, they're in different homes, whatever. But they are your responsibility. The DSS has legal and physical custody, and what that means is legal custody means that they can make legal decisions for them. Physical custody means that they have the authority to move them without going to court. So, like, DSS can have legal custody, but the physical custody can be with a relative, because, and I'm just giving an example, be with a relative because that's where the child is placed. Okay? And so, like I said, for the different units, the different sections of Department of Social Services, they can be a myriad of things. Okay? Because they do a myriad of things, and lots of times they will work hand in hand. The Medicaid is going to change the TANF, which is the check that a parent gets, will change when their child goes into DSS custody, goes into foster care. That stops. The food stamps stop for the kid because the kid is no longer there. And so there's a lot of different processes within the Department of Social Services. Department of Human Services, it just kind of depends where you are. It can be called different things. Okay? And one thing too, the Department of Social Services also has a legal unit where there's attorneys who work there. There's paralegals who work in the legal unit, because remember I mentioned that you have to go to court. So I have to do a report to the court. I had to do a report to the court. It had to be approved by my supervisor, and then it had to go to legal. And so sometimes you would have to go to legal to talk to them about a case of some children. And so there's attorneys, and of course Human Resource Department as well, IT as well. Everyone works hand in hand to row this boat. This is a big boat that's being rowed, so everybody works hand in hand to make sure that everything is okay. One of the things that I would like for you to do for homework, and I give homework, and sometimes I'll have the homework, sometimes you'll have the homework, and sometimes we'll both have the homework. But your homework is going to be, I would like for you to look at your local Department of Social Services and just do some research, even just look to see of a unit that you wasn't aware of, or a section that you wasn't aware of, and some of the things that they might do in that section. I'm going to give myself homework too. I am going to post the syllabus by the end of the night. It is the 28th, and so I will post the syllabus by the end of the night. I know that everybody is taking 300 classes, me too, because Hillman Talk is wonderful, and of course we give a shout out to our founder for this wonderful idea, to keep us, to get us, to make us be educated. Okay, and so I will have the syllabus posted We will meet again on next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're going to be talking about some agency lingo. Okay, some agency language. There's a lot of acronyms that are used, and a lot of different things are used. Like when we talk about the DSS, APS, CPS. When we talk about court, and different things about court and everything like that. So I did not learn a lot of stuff about Department of Social Services in college. I learned about being a social worker in college. But when I got to Department of Social Services, that's when I realized that there's really 1,000 different types of social workers. They really are all over, and that, we have to work hand in hand. We do work hand in hand, and that, there is an evolution of social work. Some of the things that I did as a social worker in my 20s, I don't do as a social worker in my 50s, even though I'm still a social worker. So we will talk about that too, the evolution of your social work career. I will tell you that being a social worker and saying I want to be a social worker is just like saying I want to be a teacher. There's so many things that you can do. There's so many places that you can go with that. There are so many different opportunities. Okay? If it's your desire to do agency social work, again, there's totally different opportunities, even though we're talking about Department of Social Services, Department of Health Services. So, hit me up if you have any questions or anything like that. I'm thinking that we're going to do live on next Tuesday, but I wanted to post so that you all will have a video to be able to see. Our time is usually going to run around about 30 minutes that we do the videos and different things like that. Also, on Wednesdays, I will give an all things social work tip. So, because I've worn several different hats as a social worker, I'll just give some tips that I learned as a social worker that kind of maybe blew me away, or the things that I learned that I was like, wow, nobody told me about this in school. Okay. Also, on Thursdays, if you're interested, I am teaching a Fundamentals of Clinical Supervision class. It is a graduate course. I am also a clinical supervisor. I am a social work therapist now. So I'm a clinical supervisor, which means that I supervise people who intend to get their full license to be therapists. So I've been doing that for about 6 years too. So I hope that you've enjoyed the class. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll answer them as I am able. Education is wonderful. Knowledge is power. I'm so glad that we are coming together to educate one another. Thank you again for your attendance. I appreciate it greatly. Have a great rest of the day. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay? And as for now, ding ding, class over. I'll see you next Tuesday. Go Panthers.